Hello and welcome back. In this next series, I'm going to be looking at some games that I played in Cleveland from about a month ago. And yes, this was just a 5-round event. This is round one. I was paired black against an expert, and yeah, there was not a lot of time to prepare, but I looked him up afterwards, and I think he is one of the he's like in the top 100 list for. I forget if he's under 14 or under 16. So anyway, yeah, very talented junior player. And yeah, I had no idea what to expect too much, but he played e4. And yeah, I decided to stick to my guns this game and play the Caro-Kann. So we actually got one of the pet lines that I get a lot. For some reason, kids really like to play the two knights against the Caro-Kann. And then, yeah, I usually have a lot of fun playing knight a6, which is a move that pretty much takes them out of book right away. So, okay, he played, yeah, one of the main moves here, taking on f6. You could also play with d4 instead of taking on f6, which is what Joshua Ruiz did against me in a previous tournament. But this is also fine. Now, actually, one of the interesting opening traps in this position is something my opponent actually fell into. So here, kind of the whole point of this system for black is compared to one of the normal like Bronstein-Larsen kind of positions. So like this would be in the classical Caro-Kann, there's a variation that goes like this at f6, which I actually used to play with black. Nowadays I take with the e-pawn, but one of the older lines is to take the g-pawn like this. And you can see it's pretty much a similar structure to what we end up getting in the game. Except my knight is on a6, the queen's on e2, this knight's already on f3. But one of the main ways for white to play against this is to fianchetto out of this bishop and play g3 and bishop g2. And this is considered like the most testing way to play. Then if black ever castles queenside, this bishop is really powerful along diagonal. Later white will play b4, b5, or break with c4 and d5. And the king is going to be pretty safe on the king side because this g3 totally like shuts down the g-file for black. However, with a line that I play, there's actually a very sneaky trap that prevents white from being able to get that set up. So after here, knight a6 takes on f6 gf. My opponent played like what looks like a very natural move here, g3. But this is actually already a mistake. It walks into this really devious trap. And yeah, that's why like d4 is a better move here. I think you might also be able to play c3 and then d4, but yeah, really g3 is not something white can play with right now. And the reason why this doesn't work is just tactics. The queen has already moved to e2, this knight is already on a6, and it turns out that black can actually pretty much equalize right away by playing knight b4. So we're hitting c2, d3 is pretty much forced, and now we take advantage of this move g3 and play bishop g4. So this is something that I had known like before the game, so I was playing my moves pretty quickly. And yeah, I think actually when I played knight b4, this is where he started thinking. So he thought for 10 minutes, and then I think he might have realized what was going on. Bishop g4, so we're going to take the knight and take on c2, bishop g2, and now queen d5. So now we're threatening knight takes c2, queen takes, we'll take on f3. And the only way not to lose a pawn here for white is to play king d1, which is actually the best move. And yeah, I've analyzed this a little bit with engines, and for some reason, computers think this is equal. I mean, in human terms, this looks very difficult to play for white, especially with a king on d1, because black is going to castle queenside very quickly and play like e5, e4, so definitely not a fun position for white to play. And yeah, after thinking for a little bit, he just decided to sacrifice the pawn and castle. But I've looked at this also, there's really no compensation here. So we are kind of spending a lot of time, this is all that happened, and it looks like white has a lead in development. I mean, he's already castled, but really, yeah, with so many pieces being exchanged off, it's hard for white to actually drum up any real counterplay. Like if he just makes a simple developing move, I can re-centralize my queen, and it's really hard for white to make any threats. So because of that, he played probably the best move, queen b3. And I didn't actually know like concretely how black is supposed to play this position. I just knew that I knew that white does not have anywhere near compensation for the pawn. Like this, it's actually no compensation, pretty much. But yeah, I wasn't quite sure what to play here. I did think about playing b6, but yeah, I just decided it would be safer to castle, not really compromise my structure, make sure my king is safe. And my idea was if he takes on f7, I would play queen d5. I think it's probably too dangerous to take on d3 because, I mean, at the very least, like, you might be able to throw this check in. If I go to b8, then the bishop will come in here. If I block, then you can just keep running around with the queen. I wasn't totally sure about something like this. The bishop arrives on either e3 or maybe f4, and for the rooks coming into center very quickly, this felt like I'm giving white a little bit too much play. But no, I mean, after queen d5, this is also just good for black. You have to trade queens. The queen has nowhere to go. And then, even though I'm not going to win a pawn, this kind of position is just going to be slightly better for black. So like I'll play a6 to stop bishop takes a7. And then, yeah, I was thinking in some position like this, where white has this isolated pawn, black is slightly better, but this is really white's only weakness, so it's not really a huge advantage. But I would have been prepared to play this endgame out for a while. So it actually turns out that black can play b6 here. Like b6 is just the best move. Like the engine just cold-bloodedly shuts down all of this counterplay and doesn't really worry about like plans like this. It just wants to keep the king in the center. And the problem is white doesn't really have time to play stuff like a4 or a5 because black actually has very serious counterplay with h5. And like already here, if you play a5 and just ignore me, h4 is going to be a pretty serious problem because I'm threatening h3. There's really no way to stop it. So actually white here has to bail out and go into a queen trade. Like you have to start playing moves like queen c4 to play queen e4 and trade queens. And then, alright, if you trade queens, the counterplay is really going to dry up. Black is still a pawn up. Like you have to go here, black will just ignore you. Go here. It's game over. So yeah, I mean, and even if white tries to stop this attack with like h4, black can bring more resources at e6. This bishop will go to either c5 or d6. The rook goes to g8. And just for example, like bishop e3, rook g8, already threatening this. King h2, bishop will go to d6, and this position is going to fall apart very quickly. Bishop takes g3 is a threat, rook g1, rook g4, and now there's no defense to rook takes h4. So something like that is just very illustrative of how powerful black's attack is on the king side. So yeah, definitely next time I will probably play b6 if I have this position again. So, however, to my surprise, after I castled, he did not take on f7, he played bishop e3, so I'm not quite sure what he didn't like about it. I mean, because now he's just going to be down a pawn. Like, I'll play queen d5, and we basically will get kind of the same position if he wants to go into an endgame, except he's just going to be a pawn down, compared to the other position where it would have been equal material, but at least he would have only been slightly worse with this isolated pawn. So yeah, I mean, the problem is white really doesn't have a better thing to do than trade queens, because if you keep queens on the board, like, it's very easy for me to deal with this counterplay. And I thought, like, if you play rook f c1, I'll play e6, stopping rook c5. It's going to take white a while to organize this b5 break, and meanwhile my h5, h4 is coming very quickly. So I don't ever really need to take this d3 pawn until later, because if I ever take it, it's just going to open up the d file for you. So stuff like this, black is like borderline winning, actually. So yeah, he actually did play the best practical chance. He thought here for a little while, like over 20 minutes, and he ends up taking on a7, which I think is a good idea, because now if I want to trade queens, which I have to if I want to stay up a pawn, then at least I've opened up his rook. But yeah, I calculated this a little bit, and I didn't really see where his counterplay was going. Like here, he ends up playing bishop c5, and it's pretty easy for me to stop these threats, like rook a8. I mean, if he plays bishop b6, which is a very obvious move, then I was thinking I could play bishop g7. And then if you try something like rook a8 and then rook a7, I'll play rook b8, and while it may look ugly and passive rook, you really have no way to create more threats. This is easily defended, and I'm threatening to collect more pawns, and there's really there's nothing else for it to do here. And another funny line that I saw was if he tries rook fd1, I wouldn't trade rooks here. I would offer him a trade on my own terms and play rook d5. And then if he tries to insist by playing like rook ac1, I still don't want to trade rooks because that's going to give him the d file. It's going to be very difficult for me to challenge it, this bishop on b6. But actually I saw I can play king d7. And if he takes on d5 and plays rook c7 check, like this actually is not a big deal at all because you can't take on b7. I have this fork, and you're going to lose the bishop. So like black is completely winning here because you actually, like this bishop can't move anywhere because this rook has to be defended. Threatening rook a8 and then rook a6, basically it's going to be game over. Like bishop a5, I go here. And white's losing material. b6 or b4, I can take this. So yeah, that was a funny line that I saw, although it did not end up happening. I actually did find the best move for white while my opponent was thinking, because I was trying to figure out like what on earth could he do. And I realized that this move b4 might actually be a little bit tricky to handle, because maybe he actually wants to play b5 and then sacrifice a pawn to open up the c file. I mean, something like this, it's not really, super serious because I can still play rook d5 and just stop it. But now he can kind of get an improved version of the game. So in the game he played bishop c5, but this would be an improved version that we'll see later. So anyway, he played bishop c5, and after the simple king c7, rook a8, bishop g7, there's really nothing else for white to do here. If he goes to a7, he's not doing anything. So trades rooks, and then he plays bishop takes e7. And this is kind of the critical moment where it's apparent that having this pawn on b4 would be a big help for white, because it's not going to be hanging in a lot of lines. And here I had a bit of a decision whether to just be completely greedy and take on b3, and this will allow white some kind of counterplay, like you can play rook d1, rook d8, you can play rook a1, and rook a8. I sometimes have to worry about my bishop getting stuck here. The alternative was to play f5, but yeah, it's still going to be very good for black, but because you're going to end up winning this pawn anyway. But it's not going to be like super easy to win. You're still going to have to convert this and make a pass pawn eventually, and they should be winning in the long term. But yeah, this I calculated was pretty simply winning. And there was one line that I had to see, so he plays rook d1. So pretty much his main idea is to play rook d8 and then rook f8 to go after this pawn, or if the bishop goes to g7, then start chasing the bishop, and either get the rook to h8 or f8, start collecting one of these pawns on h7 and f7. And here I saw that I can play f5, and after rook d8, bishop takes b2, rook f8 does not actually work for him because of rook d3. So all of this happened. And yeah, the problem is if you take on f7, then I come back here. Bishop is pinned, there's no way to save it. I'm going to play bishop a3 next move, so something like this is going to be an easy win for black. And he actually found a move here that I didn't look at. So he thought for like 6 minutes here and played bishop f6, which actually came as a bit of a shock to me at first, although it doesn't really save white. So, I mean, I kind of have to take it. But yeah, this endgame with the two connected passed pawns, even though now material will be equal, I just start pushing my b pawn, and this is a very easy win for black. So, yeah, the game finished king g2. I just invest in this pawn, b3, rook f3, b2. I mean, as a general rule, when you have this situation where you have two connected passed pawns, it's usually better to just push one of them as far as it can go before you push the other one. Because black is still winning here, even if you just play slowly, like king b6 and c5, but because white does not really have any counterplay here. Like, these pawns are way too slow. But yeah, as a general rule, that's like the easiest way to make things work, is just to get this pawn all the way over here. Now this rook has to be passive on b3, and I play rook d2, and it's totally paralyzed. You can't move this. If you play king f1, then I go here. If you play king f3, I play rook d3 check. So yeah, this is really like, it's stuck here. So he could resign, although if he played a couple moves, h4, c5, g4, c4, rook b4, c3, okay, g5, c2. And once he saw I was getting ready to make a couple of queens, he threw in the towel here. So yeah, that was a pretty easy first round game. I pretty much actually got to use some opening preparation that I have in this pet line here by Paciorkowski. knight a6. And yeah, actually, I have to say the Caro-Kann has been serving me pretty well usually against lower-rated players because, yeah, for some reason, it's a very resilient opening. It's very hard to play super aggressively against it without overextending yourself with white. So I find that against a lot of kids who like to play very aggressively, if they can't really do that against the Caro-Kann, and the game turns into a positional struggle, usually that ends up in my favor. So we'll see actually another game from this tournament. I also played the Caro-Kann. That was a very long positional struggle, which I was able to outplay my opponent, who was kind of similar to my opponent here. He was a little bit higher rated, but also a junior player. So okay, that'll do it for round 1, and I'll see you next time for round 2.